Hello and welcome to the Recruit Rockstars podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Hyman. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I interview a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And whether you are funded by a venture capitalist or funded by a private equity firm, or maybe you're funded by you and a mortgage and two mortgages and you're bootstrapping this thing, I think today's guest is going to have a ton of actionable, really useful advice. Her name is Amanda Mulay. Now, Amanda is the senior talent manager at a very high-profile VC firm, Lerer Hippeau, based in New York City. And her background is like a who's who of recruiting. Began at Zynga, which you have played their games on your phone, let's be honest, and worked in recruiting there before moving on to Twilio, which I'm a customer of, with VoIP and messaging and just a phenomenal platform. She then moved on to First Round Capital, a terrific VC firm based in San Francisco, and then Andreesen Horowitz in a similar capacity, partner on the talent front for 3 years, where she helped to recruit people and advise their portfolio companies. She's now doing the same thing at Lerer Hippeau in New York. And with all that said, welcome to the show, Amanda.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm really excited to be here today.
I'm thrilled to have you on. I've really been looking forward to it because it's hard to imagine someone that has seen this movie as many times as you have. And so over the next 20 minutes, I think you're going to give us a ton of great advice. Why don't we jump right in and maybe just tell me what you're seeing these days at just a very high level in terms of attracting talent to your portfolio companies. How hard is it really? Where are you finding people? What's working?
Yeah, I mean, given our reputation at Larry Hippo, and the entire team, they've been operators at past companies, and I think that we've all done a really great job of building our own networks. So I think, it's been pretty easy for us to get really great talent through the door and connect them with our companies. Of course, technical talent is always going to be a struggle. We have, a talent tracker, and it's essentially a reverse job board on our website. So anyone can upload their resume, and I go through and I can, decide if I'd like to activate their account, if I think they'd be a good fit for our companies. And we have some phenomenal people coming from legacy, retail, beauty companies, even across the board from, enterprise, SaaS companies. But you'll never really see a CTO in there or individual contributors on the engineering side. Mm-hmm. So I do have to say that, when our companies are asking for engineering help, especially in New York, it's hard to find that talent. But
so what do you do in that case? Once you tap out your network and the firm's network, you've asked your portfolio companies, you've looked at the talent tracker, the seat is empty. What do you do then?
Yeah, so what I usually have our founders do is put together a spreadsheet and actually input the profiles that they're looking for that specific role. Mm-hmm. And I will actually go through and identify those profiles and go through my LinkedIn. I will also start actively sourcing and reach out to folks as well. But I always make sure that the founders know that I'm matching the right profile before I do these reach outs. Mm-hmm. But it's just really being active, because at the end of the day, these people are not going to be, coming to our talent tracker or reaching out to me individually or to our founders. So you have to get creative. So I think, making sure that if they don't have the capability or the time to actively source, and if they don't have someone on our team who's able to do that, that I could at least, kind of start the function for them and start getting people familiar with our company.
You mentioned being creative. As you do that outreach, as you talk with candidates, you're up against Google and Facebook and Amazon, yes, who can afford to pay, 4 times more than maybe a portfolio company can. What have you found to be the most effective hook at getting prospective candidates to really engage and listen when you're not paying top of the market?
Yeah, I mean, your reach outs really have to be personalized. You really need to either go on GitHub if they're technical, or go on their LinkedIn and really send out a personalized email, and try to sell them on the opportunity that they're going to be working on, especially for an early stage company. I mean, there's a lot of risk, especially for folks who have a family, going from a very comfortable job at Facebook, Google, Amazon, and, going to a smaller company. You really need to sell them on the prize. And, sometimes the best part about, when you get someone on the phone, you really do learn more about, what they're thinking, if you can persuade them, if they're looking to have more visibility and work with, executive team more than what they're doing now. But it can be a struggle. And I've been seeing a shift between people not taking stock options as much and taking more money. So that's also like a whole different story. But you really need to make sure that all of your outreach emails are very personalized to each person that you reach out to.
Which can be pretty time consuming, right?
It is. Yeah. And it's not easy for a founder who's, running every part of their business and then finding, 6 hours of their day reaching out to folks, because you get maybe a couple of responses for every 100 emails you send. So
right.
It's definitely time consuming.
So how do you know when it's time to call in the big guns and call in a headhunter? Obviously they're not cheap, but some of them are terrific. How do you make the decision, or if you're a founder or listening to the show, how do you make that decision? Should I spend $20,000, $50,000 to bring in a headhunter for this particular role?
Yeah, I mean, people play such a big part of every organization, especially in the early days when you're moving to C to Series A. And my thing is, I always coach our founders that if you really don't have the time to do these reach outs, and we have 250 plus companies in our portfolio, and I think 3,000 open roles on our job board, and I'm a one-woman show. So, I can't be helping everyone with every single position they really need help with. But, that's when I've really vetted out top tier search firms, and I make sure that these people are going to take really good care of our companies, that sometimes they can cut, some of their price, depending if, it's an executive level role or individual contributor. But it's really selling, to our founders understand how important it is to get this type of profile in the door, because the longer you wait, your company might fail.
Yeah. So it could be the difference between making it or not.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's, it could be, $95,000 up front, but at the same time, do you want your company to fail, or do you want it to, potentially get acquired, or, one day IPO? So who knows?
So when you make that decision to look at at getting outside help, there are so many headhunters, right? There's countless, 90,000, I think, in the US. How do you make that decision? What do you look at to decide who would be the right match in terms of a headhunter to lead that search?
Yeah. So, I mean, I have more coffee meetings that anyone would probably expect with headhunters. I really try to break them up in sectors. So I'll have folks who specialize in finance and product and engineering and, administrative, EA, everything across the board. So I will hold these meetings, and a lot of them will actually come through referrals. And luckily we do have a VC talent group on Gmail. It's a Google group, and we're all very collaborative. So if any of us, because at the end of the day, we're trying to solve the same problem. So if I don't know what recruiter to use for a specific hire or company, I can ask the group, and I will get so many recommendations that have already been vetted. And then from there, I can decide who I'd like to, work with and, add to our preferred vendor list or make that introduction to our company.
What roles do job boards play in all that? Have you found them to be useful? Are there certain ones that are better than others, or largely a waste of time?
I think, job boards are great. I think that because we have it on our Lerer Hippeau website, a lot of folks actually will just go to our company, and we use Monday VC, which I highly recommend, every VC company to use, but it scrapes the boards, every job board of all of our companies, I believe every Monday, which would make sense. And it keeps everything up to date, but you won't find your executive level positions on those job boards. Mm-hmm. Or, our early stage companies, they don't have job boards yet, or they're not managing them. So the roles are not up to date. So I think they're pretty, important to have those open roles, especially when someone's trying to understand what a company is doing and if they want to learn more about what they're hiring for.
Let's shift gears from hiring to kind of the culture, right? And the DNA. Each of your 250 companies has a very different feel, I'm sure, a different type of person that they're looking for. You've worked with a lot of founders and CEOs. How do you craft the words around what my DNA should look like? What kind of culture I should try to create? Is there a process that you take them through?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to build your company philosophy and really build that around your culture. So I think, and those are your values that you'll be working off from day one, and that's included in your interview process. That's included in your onboarding. That's included as an employee until you end up leaving and having your last day with the company. So it's very important to figure out what your values are and your culture. And, each company is so different, so I can't run by one playbook. I really have to get to know the founders, what do they believe in, and also maybe shift their ideas as well. Like, a lot of folks need to work at a place that's, a work-life balance, that has a strong maternity leave, that there's diversity and inclusion, and that the, entrepreneurs are very much in sync with that. So it's a lot of, thinking sessions of figuring out what's the right, philosophy for each company, but it's extremely important that you just, build that from day one. And you can obviously change that over time when your company goes from 5 people to 300, which is actually what happened at Twilio while I was there. But yeah.
And what happens if you get it wrong? So I'm sure you've seen founders mess this up or not do it at all. Can you give a real life example, you don't have to name names, of what happens if you don't get that DNA right from very early on?
You'll lose people immediately. I think there's a percentage that, in onboarding, if you have, I believe, 90 days to kind of figure out your culture and how you're going to treat your employees and, how everything is laid out. And it's extremely important to figure that out sooner than later, because you'll lose people. I believe the statistic is around you'll lose 30% of your folks if it's up to 90 days and if it's not figured out.
Which is that's death. I mean, that's instant death for a company. You can't afford to have that kind of attrition.
Yes, and it's very expensive to have that attrition. That's not something that founders want to go through.
Right.
So you really need to be thoughtful about your philosophy on culture and hiring, and also, who you're bringing into your company.
Which I guess then begs the next question, which is probably the most difficult. How do you know it's coming? How do you know when the CEO or the founder or co-founder is the problem with regard to the culture and the DNA? And what do you do?
Yeah, that's tough. We always want to believe, especially in the early stage, when we're making these investments, that, all of our founders are perfect. Mm-hmm. But, when the business grows, the business sometimes outgrows the founders. So, you have to have these hard conversations and see if they're willing to step down and take a board, see if they maybe want to take a COO or be a co-founder if they're only a founder. There's ways to go about this, but you really need to step in, especially, as an investor. And if you have a board seat, you need to really make changes, because if people don't respect their founders, and we never want that to happen, that's when you'll lose people.
And how do you have that discussion? I'm sure you've had this discussion with founders before where you're giving them the hard news, right? So for founders or leaders that might be listening, and maybe they're wondering if they're the right person to lead the business, what questions should they ask themselves to help them decide, I'm not the right person to lead my company?
Yeah, I mean, I personally don't have these questions, to be candid. If it does come from someone at Lerer Hippeau, it'll be someone on our investment team. And depending on the stage they are, if they're a Series A or a Series B, it might be someone from the later stage fund that has more ownership of the company. But it is a hard conversation, but it has to happen because, there's been certain examples recently where, someone wasn't respecting some of their employees, not one of our companies. But there's backlash and it gets reported, and people will put their reviews on Glassdoor, and you can't hide that. So it's really important to try to avoid that, because it will destroy your company, and people will not join it because they read these reviews.
You mentioned the Glassdoor, and a lot of my clients just, they can't stand it. And I've told them, it's not going away, like it or not. maybe you can convince them. What would you tell people about the importance of Glassdoor, and what can you do about it to manage it and use it for good as opposed to being a problem?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully when people are getting comments on Glassdoor, whether it's an interview or a past employee or a current, hopefully they at this point might have someone in the people space that can, handle the, whatever the issue is.
Mm-hmm.
But, hopefully they can learn from this and make the changes and progress, proactively as a company. But it's almost like Yelp. I feel like a lot of people use Yelp and Glassdoor to complain, and to really,
it's like a vocal
really
minority of negative.
They're not highlighting, the best qualities of a company or the culture or, their manager. So it's a scary thing to have, but, I hope that people take it seriously and they read those, reviews and they try to make changes, and really figure out where the problem is.
It's tough to look in the mirror, but it actually can be incredibly instructive if you're willing to.
If you're willing to, yeah.
If you're willing to do it, which is not always easy, and I can understand that.
Yes.
One last question. You've seen so many early stage companies. Have you decided for yourself what you think is the right or optimal number of co-founders? I've seen 1, 2, 3, 5, 10. Do you have a gut feel on what really is the best?
I think 2 co-founders is really the best, or at least you come in with a COO. I just feel like personally for myself, if I were to start a company, there's so many parts of the business that you have to touch. I mean, you're in the finance, you're in the people, HR, recruiting, product, engineering. And, I think it's smart, depending on what your company is also to have one technical co-founder, where you can really take things off each other's plates. And I do think it relieves the stress, because I do think at a point, there will be a breaking point where, they're going to be exhausted, and it's just not going to be a good place for the founder or their employees. And I do think 2 is the right number. Part
of it really is just the sheer amount of work that has to get done and whether one person can handle it, even if you're working around the clock.
Exactly. And some of these founders, they don't sleep. They're constantly working.
Which is not healthy.
Raising, more money. They're, trying to get more, business development. It's really everything. So I think if there's 2 people who can divide and conquer, that's really the best way to go about it.
The business person and the tech person.
Yes.
Well, Amanda, I can't thank you enough for making the time. I really appreciate it, and the listeners do too. How can people learn more about Lerer Hippeau or get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can add me on LinkedIn, Amanda Mulay, and then Lerer Hippeau, we are very active on our website. So just check us out at lererhippeau.com. If you are looking for new jobs, we have our talent tracker, as I mentioned before. It's a reverse job board. And if you have questions about venture capital, we've actually developed quite a few Medium posts about how you can break into VC or just venture capital in general. So happy to share, those posts with you if you want to, send me a message. But yeah, Lerer Hippeau is a great venture capital firm, and I'm really happy to be here. It's a great opportunity.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Amanda Mulay. We really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much, Jeff.